about it.
Hollywood's most glamorous and legendary stars. A great screen talent who infused her roles with the wit, charm, and warmth of her own personality. She was at the height of her popularity in 1942 when she was killed in a plane crash while returning to California after completing a war bond tour. Her sudden and tragic death left millions of movie fans stunned and crushed the spirit of her husband, Clark Gable, who never fully recovered from his beloved wife's passing. To see Carole Lombard's films today is to see a truly great artist at work, and yet, at the same time, one feels a haunting sadness in knowing that at the time of her death, Carole Lombard's best work had yet to come. She was born Jane Alice Peters on October 6, 1908 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Her family moved to Southern California when she was 6, and Jane made her first screen appearance at age 12 in the silent classic A Perfect Crime. After leaving high school in 1925, Jane returned to filmmaking and signed a contract with Fox Studios. The Fox publicity department changed her name to Carole Lombard, and she starred in 4 silent films over the next 2 years, including Marriage in Transit, Hearts and Spurs, Badlands, and The Road to Glory. In 1927, Carole signed with Mack Sennett Studios, where she appeared in 12 slapstick comedies between 1927 and 1928. The comedic timing and expression she learned during her Sennett years would play a big role later in Carole's career. In the 1930s, Carole started to play mostly straight leading lady roles in films such as It Pays to Advertise, Ladies' Man, I Take This Woman, and No Man of Her Own, co-starring Clark Gable. Although Lombard and Gable got along quite well and thoroughly enjoyed each other's company, it would be another 4 years before the start of the famed Gable-Lombard romance. At that time, Carole was married to actor William Powell and Gable to his second wife, Rhea Langham. The turning point in Carole Lombard's career came in 1934, when she starred opposite John Barrymore in the classic screwball comedy 20th Century. The film made Carole a major star. Her early comedic training at Sennett Studios enabled her to perform brilliantly beside the legendary Barrymore. And after a decade on the screen, Carole at last had found her place as the cinema's top-ranking comedienne. Upon completing 20th Century, Barrymore presented Carole with a photo of himself inscribed with the following words: "To Carole, the best actress I have ever worked with, bar none." Coming from an actor of Barrymore's stature, this meant a lot to Carole, and the photo became one of her treasured possessions. Although Lombard's marriage to William Powell ended in divorce in 1933, they remained close friends afterwards. Following her divorce from Powell, Carole became romantically involved with singer Russ Columbo, and the two were engaged to be married. But in 1936, Columbo died tragically when a shotgun he was cleaning went off accidentally, killing him instantly. After Columbo's death, Lombard threw herself into her work, making great films such as My Man Godfrey, Nothing Sacred, and Lady by Choice. It was in 1936, after completing My Man Godfrey, that Carole became involved with Clark Gable. Both attended a Hollywood party thrown by John Hayes Whitney, and it was the start of Hollywood's most famous and fabled romance. In many ways, it was a storybook love affair. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, adored by millions of women the world over, had finally found his perfect mate, the one woman who could make him happy, Carole Lombard. Carole had grown up with 2 older brothers, and because of this, was somewhat of a tomboy. This appealed to Gable because she shared many common interests, such as fishing, hunting, camping, and the outdoor life. Carole could rough it with the best of them. She could curse and drink, yet she always retained her femininity and sensuality. Carole and Clark were perfectly suited for each other in almost every way. They were married in March of 1939, and shortly after, purchased a ranch in Encino, California, where both were able to escape the pressures of stardom. Like all married couples, Clark and Carole had their differences, and people who knew them say that when they did fight, the battle could last for days. But in the end, their love always pulled them back together. Never before in their lives were Clark and Carole so content as they were with each other. As the decade of the 40s began, the future looked bright and promising for the Gables. Clark was the most famous, most popular star in the world, and Carole was making her own mark in screen history, with brilliant work in film classics such as Made for Each Other, In Name Only, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They knew what they wanted, and to be or not to be. In fact, by 1940, Carole Lombard was America's most popular female star and became the nation's highest paid woman, grossing over $500,000 a year. The little girl from Indiana had come a long way. With the coming of World War II, America marched off to war, and so did Hollywood. Many stars enlisted in the service and saw battle action, while those at the home front did their part by hosting war bond rallies. In December of 1941, Clark Gable was named chairman of the Hollywood Victory Committee, and he and Carole worked tirelessly arranging and scheduling bond-selling tours around the nation. In January of 1942, Carole embarked on a bond-selling tour that would climax in her native state of Indiana. Accompanying Carole on the trip were her mother, Elizabeth Peters, and Otto Winkler, an MGM press agent and close friend of the Gables. Carole's tour was a resounding success and was topped off by her appearance in Indianapolis, where she sold over $2 million worth of war bonds. Before departing, Carole delivered a moving patriotic address and then led the crowd in the singing of the national anthem. As she left, the crowd gave her such an enormous ovation, it brought tears to Carole's eyes. On January 16th, at 4 o'clock in the morning, Carole Lombard boarded TWA Flight 3 in Indiana, scheduled to land in California at 8:30 that evening. The flight made a stopover in Albuquerque, New Mexico to pick up 15 Army officers, and then continued on to Las Vegas, Nevada, where it stopped to refuel. At 7:07 p.m., the plane took off from Nevada on the last leg of its flight to California. Then, at 7:26, the Skyliner crashed into Table Rock Mountain, about 30 miles southwest of Las Vegas. All 22 passengers were killed instantly upon impact. The news of Carole's death stunned the nation. A grieving Clark Gable rushed to Nevada to join the search for his wife's body. The first 2 days of the search were futile, as the search party had difficulties getting through the rugged mountain terrain to the wreckage. On the third day, Gable stayed behind and the search party broke through, finding what was left of the aircraft. Carole Lombard's body was identified by a wisp of unscorched blonde hair and by one diamond earring from a set Gable had given her. Clark never fully recovered from Carole's tragic death. He was described as a man crushed in spirit, a man who had lost everything dear to him. For the rest of his life, Gable wore Carole's diamond earring in a locket around his neck. Funeral services for Carole Lombard were held on January 21st, 1942 in Glendale, California. Hollywood turned out en masse to mourn Carole's untimely death. Clark Gable received condolences from across the nation, including a telegram from President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whom Clark and Carole had met only a few months before. She brought great joy to all who knew her, wrote the president to Gable. She gave unselfishly of her time and talent to serve her government in peace and war. She loved her country. She is, and always will be, a star, one we shall never forget, nor cease to be grateful to. Carole Lombard.